Riff crew brings you a deep riff special with the influential underground band Integrity. Join us for discussions with Dwid Hellion and Domenic Romeo, plus live footage from their Australian 2020 tour. Welcome to the program. This is the Riff crew, and of course we are here for the Deep Riff. You are with hosts Stephen Mitchell and myself, Andrew Hogue, and it's all about Integrity, which is the group. Stephen, of course, captured them on an Australian tour with your magnificent camera work, and of course the band's amazing stage presence. We do have the main man, the legend that is Dwid, ready to have a chat with us all about what's happening in his world and also Integrity and everything else that's going on. Welcome to the program, Dwid.
Hey, thanks for having me, Andrew.
No
Appreciate
problem.
it.
So, Dwid, 2020 has been a bit of a strange year, but I guess we'll start on a bright note. For the first time in 32 years, you made it down to Australia. Is it kind of a surprise that, you know, it took so long, or is it a surprise that you actually made it down to Australia?
I never really put it into that kind of perspective. I'd always just expect that the music is too strange for most people. So when opportunities don't arise for Integrity, I'm not surprised by it, you know. So
has that been a challenge for you over the years, considering that there's so much influence out there to keep with the times or to join the herd or whatever, or it's just been a natural evolution for Dwid to stand alone?
well, I mean, it also isn't like I have a soapbox and I'm trying to be, oh, look, I'm special or something. It's not like that as much as it's just like I just don't see the point of making something that everybody else is making all the time. It just seems boring to me. So when you have all these guys that, when you have bands that is just making the same old things constantly, sounds exactly the same, to me, I don't feel that would be rewarding for me. So I do something, I just do what I like to do, whether or not people like it or not. It's just for me. And it's nice when other people enjoy it too. Sometimes there's people out there who have a similar appetite for music and artwork. So that allows me to travel. But it's never really a main focus to try to please anybody.
And how do you feel with live shows? I know you don't play live that much, but is it just something that you would like to do more of, especially after all this COVID shit eventually lifts, or are you just happy to just do sporadic shows various times?
Well, we play probably without, when the pestilence isn't happening, we play probably about 2 months a year collectively. Oftentimes those are just 1 or 2 shows at a time, festivals or something. And then we'll do many tours that'll last maybe a week or something like that. But at the end of the year, it ends up being about 2 months worth. Of course, Australia, it was the only time we ever performed there was in February.
And given when you started out, you were, I guess, writing songs about what interested you at the time, and obviously, the dark side of humanity was a topic that interests you. Do you still have the same level of interest, or maybe the same level of interest, but maybe in a different area now?
Well, I've definitely aged since I was a teenager, many decades ago, and therefore my experiences have changed, and that's altered my perspective. But the initial seed that was planted was my parents is Pentecostal Christians, and they take religion very, very seriously. And so as I was growing up, I was more attracted to art and more abstract art, surrealism, Dadaism, collage, xerography, this kind of thing, and not necessarily, portraits and such, more traditional things. So because of that, my family kind of thought of it as a bit of, the devil's work. And then the music that I liked also, as I was 13 and I got into the punk rock and the heavy metal music. And so they found that to also be, devilry. And that sort of informed my voice, I guess, because I was immediately not ostracized, but I was definitely somewhat segregated within my family because of my creative tastes. And, that's a very strange way to experience life as a young person, to have your entertainment choices dictate how your family will view you. That's a very bizarre notion, but that's how it was for me. And so that also, coupled with the fact that my family are so strongly into that, I was very informed about religion. And so metaphorically, I was able to draw from that information pool and use some of the religious aspects. But also I am interested in religion, of course, because religion is controlling a great deal of humanity's decisions in this world. But sometimes it's even almost Monty Python like comedy, how some people use religion as a tool or a weapon, depending on how you see it. So it gets a bit complicated, especially nowadays in modern politics. People use religion as a propaganda promotional tool to sell themselves as being maybe a little more trustworthy than the next guy. And then at the same time, their actions speak a very different story. So, and with that, as a as a citizen of the world that can be alarming and concerning. But then from the perspective of my music and my personal religion and personal philosophical take, it could be enjoyable to see the hypocrisy and to see the contradiction in the human, and how easy it is to see through that veil and to see the deception, but then somehow people just follow it, you know. But I think that ultimately, you know, people are have a bloodlust. They love that taste of blood, and they love to just go after somebody. You know, they've been doing it since Inquisition and, you know, the witches' hammer, and they always find an excuse to target some person or some group and try to eradicate them.
One thing we've seen a lot in the year 2020 is that command and control at a global level, given the, I guess, government responses to world events and so forth. One thing that struck me living in Australia is the relationship or the similarity between the Milgram experiment, which was conducted back in the 1960s, and Australia now. Because for those who aren't aware with the Milgram experiment, I guess the cliff notes is that the university studied the influence of authority, and a great number of people were willing to subject people to torture if authority told them to. And I'm shocked at the way that, at least in Australia, people have just followed authority blindly. Have you sort of had the moment to reflect on either locally or in Europe or globally some of the things that have given you an impression on the human experience in 2020?
Well, I don't think it's too much different than it has been in the past either, but maybe nowadays we have a clearer lens on the whole situation because we have these devices in our pocket that can look across the world and see what's going on with people. In Belgium, it has a very different, politically, it has a very different way that they deal with the citizens. And the Belgian government, it has its flaws, of course, like any other government. But basically, they look at the taxpayers as being like their children in a way, and I mean that in a positive way. They look at it as like, you know, the country is a family, and the government is more or less the parents, and they have to look after their offspring for all kinds of reasons. But I think that there is a part of that which is sincere and passionate, so that they don't want, you know, people to starve or to go without health care or things like this. I have family in America, and that's a very different animal. And you know, that's where it gets into more like what you were talking about, I think. And you see people who are the most needing of healthcare, for example. They're usually the strongest in opposition to healthcare. And the only answer I could come up with for that type of thought is that either it's you know, like when Louis Pasteur found out that there was germs, and everybody said he was crazy. How can there be these tiny animals living on us and on our food and in the air and everywhere? That can't be possible. You're out of your mind. But eventually people realized that that was actually a fact. And I think at some point, someone, some futuristic Carl Jung or Freud is going to find out that there is some kind of mass suicidal component in the human animal that wants to self-destruct. And so they, like a magnet, they gravitate towards destructive elements, destructive leaders who they follow because it's maybe a lazy way to be a masochist, you know. So, you know, when these people want to get rid of their health care and their, you know, things that their tax dollars pay for to help their life and their family's life, and they want to just give that away to corporations. I mean, the only answer I can come up with is that's some form of like a masochism or something. It doesn't make sense as to why someone would do that. Of course, there's a theory that the Americans in particular imagine themselves as billionaires in training, especially the more poorer people in the American society. They imagine themselves that they're just waiting in line, and pretty soon their number's gonna come up. Boom, they're gonna be, you know, living that social media life where they have a yacht and a golden throne and a MTV crib and all that type of thing. And so that's probably also why they're so quick to join the group and rally against everybody else and put up their pitchforks and their torches and chase people, because they think if they're gonna align themselves and conform themselves with those people who they want to become like, financially like, maybe they'll be accepted by them, and maybe they'll get a leg up in the financial game. I'm not really sure. I mean, it's you know, it's one of those puzzles that you could think about all the time, and I find it enjoyable sometimes to think about it, and frustrating, but I don't have any answers for it. You know, and the human animal is an unpredictable one, but I do believe that there is a definite self-destructive component to it, and I just wish that it would all collectively, everybody would be eradicated. But I don't want one group of people to be eradicated and not the other. I want everybody to be eradicated, but myself included. But it would be a very difficult thing to answer the question properly, because I can't really speak for masses, and I'm not really one for masses, and I'm not one for the hive mentality. So when all these other people are following each other, following like lemmings off the cliff, well, it's entertaining and it's interesting, but I can't really offer too much as to the psychology behind it, other than those two guesses I have. You know, what do you think?
I tend to agree. Is that within all of us, there's I guess the ability for good and evil, and there's also the I guess the uncontrollable aspect of it. There's an animal aspect of us, particularly when we're in fear. And so when you're in fear, you're more open to suggestion, particularly to authority. But I'm wondering, in terms of seeing these world events, do they inspire you in any way artistically?
Sure. You know, but like I want to address something you said earlier, good and evil. I don't necessarily think that that's the component in this, because, you know, like a wolf in the woods that eats a rabbit. Now, he's not evil. Now, we may see him as evil because Walt Disney sold him as evil, and we accepted that notion that he's evil because he's hungry and he's eating what he knows to eat. That doesn't mean he's really evil. And I think what I found from thinking about this, and for my 50 years, is that most people who do the most evil find themselves to be the most righteous. They find some kind of excuse that justifies their actions, whatever they may be. Because there hasn't been, except for in James Bond movies and Hollywood films, someone who says, I am doing this solely for fucking evil, man. That's it. You know, even Genghis Khan wasn't doing that. Hitler wasn't doing it for evil. All these guys, they weren't doing it, at least from the way I found out by reading books. They weren't doing it for evil, they were doing because they thought this is the right thing. Was it evil? Probably. Most of it was. But evil by the way we define it. But I don't know if these people who did acts of evil actually sat down and said, what is the most fucking evil shit I can come up with? That's what I'm going to fucking do, you know? And I would like to find someone who was like that, you know? Even like Gilles de Rais, he was a guy in the, a Frenchman who was in Joan of Arc's crew when they were having their war. And he was at one point a hero, considered a hero because he was with Joan of Arc, and then years later he got into trouble with finances, squandered his fortune, and then decided that he was interested in alchemy, and he would rape and torture and murder children, thinking that he could summon up the devil to turn stones into gold, and that would be alchemy, meaning like changing invaluable objects into valuable objects. And so that's fucking evil, right? But I don't even think in his mind he thought this is some evil shit. Of course it is evil shit, but it's a difficult way to say things because usually people tend to justify their actions even when they know they're doing bad stuff. And yeah, I don't know how to address it, I guess, you know, like, I think that when Nietzsche says beyond good and evil, I think that's what he's saying is there isn't really good and evil as much as the way that perspective is, you know, the way, like I said before, with the wolf and the rabbit, from a Walt Disney perspective, you know, you see the wolf kill the cute little bunny and then you say, what a bad wolf, what a evil motherfucker. But he was just hungry. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily right, and that doesn't mean I think that wolves should come around and start eating up everybody. But, you know, there's something to inform yourself about the way that it's seen.
And I think there's both truth in that in terms of the different perspectives, but also I go back to my days in theatre, improvisational theatre, is that when we were playing evil characters, we weren't evil for the sake of being evil. We had a purpose, and it went against the moral code or the ethical code. And I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I can't say across the board that the leaders weren't evil. I mean, weren't like, this is the fucking evil shit, and that's why I'm doing it behind doors. Maybe they were, and then that would almost make it even more interesting. But I always felt that, because there was a period where I was wondering this question, and I tried to research as much as I could in history to see if there ever was a person who said, you know, like, why are you doing this? Well, I'm fucking just doing this because it's fucking evil. I want to do everything wrong, you know. I mean, you could argue that de Sade was that way, but he was more of well, I think he was a bit mentally deranged, but at the same time, I think he was trying to push the envelope with things. And he also didn't have as much influence in his day as he probably does or did 10, 20 years ago. But yeah, I can't find somebody who was acting in the name purely of evil. Even someone like, you know, like who's a boogeyman of our era, Bin Laden. He was doing things in his mind. Whatever he did was in the name of his religion, and he thought he was doing God's work and good work. The Inquisitions, they thought they were doing God's work. They thought they were doing good and helping save souls, you know. So it's interesting, but it doesn't give us any more information. In fact, it just offers us more confusion. Source code systems overload!
When do you know you've played a good show for you personally, especially expressing the feeling through the music of integrity? This is excluding audience participation and response, but how do you know when you walk off stage for the shows that you do with integrity that you've actually played a good show?
For my role in the band, I can speak from. Of course, there's the component where has everyone done their job correctly, played everything right, and that type of thing. But on a more spiritual level, for me, when I perform, there's this kind of feeling where you almost leave your body, where it's like almost speaking in tongues, where you are outside of your normal self. Like you said, that you have some experience in theater. There's probably times where you lose yourself and you are in your character, and whatever character that may be, you don't even recognize that you're Andrew. Now you are you're Othello or something, and you embody everything that would be Othello, not anything about Andrew anymore, and you just got lost in it. And so there's like that kind of a thing, but I'm not really playing a character. I'm more going into like a spiritual seizure or something, and having like a fit. And there's this way that I kind of visualize it in my head, I guess, is that I feel like I reach to a point where I'm at the end of the universe, and I'm able to just, my toes are like on the edge, and I can almost curl them over that edge. And then the rest is just like this abyss, and it's open and it's vast, and it's like exercising everything that I love and hate in this world, and of myself, and every experience that I have. And it all is just released out in a way that is cleansing. And then at the end of the concert, I feel, I guess I feel cleansed, or I feel satisfied, or I feel exercised. Not like sports, but like demons. You know?
Of course.
Yeah, to give some examples, because I think the ancient Greeks in their theatre, they considered the actors were talking to the gods, and in some cultures they have whirling dervishes where they're spinning, they're dancing, and it's basically they enter a trance state. So it sounds like a similar type of experience. I guess.
Well, I mean, that is what music is, you know. I mean, music is that. That's how music came to be, is from those roots, you know. Also with heavy metal, like people like to misunderstand, but I mean, heavy metal started basically from the blues. You know, Robert Johnson was the first. He was long before Black Sabbath or Ozzy selling their soul to rock and roll. This man did it. Several, 40, 50 years earlier than those guys, you know, and people forget that type of thing. And also they took their music, the blues music, come from the church, and they sort of reimagined it. And the church said, this is the devil's music. And some of them said, okay, then it is the fucking devil's music. We'll make it like that. And some people live their whole life tortured because they said, no, we are spiritual people. We just like this music too. We have different components to ourselves. We're dynamic humans, and sometimes we want to sing about broken hearts, and sometimes we maybe sing about our spirituality towards God or whatever. but they didn't accept that either. So it was just across the board blacklisted from the church. But you know, all music comes from a religious background. Well, originally. Nowadays, it doesn't necessarily do that. Nowadays, it's a bit more of a product. But there's ways that you can kind of, you know, sometimes you'll listen to pieces of music, including pop music, that's basically coming almost off of an assembly line. But there's moments, even in that type of music, where you can feel the hair on your arm stand up, where you can feel like that person is passionate and that they mean it. You know, like, for example, let me think of a reference that you wouldn't expect me to give. Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. That's a Dolly Parton song. But there's moments in that song when she's singing it where you're just like, whether you like her or not as a musician or as a person, there's moments where it's just, that's a religious experience, what she's giving you. She's making something that's just, she's creating something that is on par with great art. You know, you can just feel it in your bones and in your heart, and it makes you feel.
Speaking of the assembly line and productization of music, I think, you know, if I'm paraphrasing, I think it's an Andy Warhol quote, is that he said the difference between a product and art, or at least his art, was imperfections. When you're crafting music, how do you create the impression or the expression that you're looking for, but still have those imperfections, given that we're living in the digital age and we have so many technologies at hand?
That's one of my favorite quotes from Warhol. And what he said was, someone said to him, you are making, when he was doing the series of screen prints of Marilyn Monroe and Campbell Soup and Mick Jagger and electric chairs and stuff, he would have these large silk screens made, and he would try to screen print them onto canvas. And someone said, what's the difference between what you're doing and, like, you know, if a department store was just doing that in their factory? And he said, well, I'm not good at screen printing, and so the flaws, that's the art. You know, that those imperfections are the art. And I think of that quote often, because, you know, it can be applied to a lot of different things, but those kinds of imperfections, that's what makes us human, because none of us are perfect. And at the same time, you know, with music, if everything is totally robotically perfect, it loses that kind of passion, I think, you know. And there's a place for that, of course. You know, some electronic music is just solely like AI or something, like just robotic music made by a computer that doesn't have any, doesn't convey the emotions, but it conveys a certain thing, you know. I mean, there's a place for everything. That's a weird thing about music, is that people want to think of music as only one way. But if you look at film, they have a lot more freedom with film. So, and I don't like to get into categorization or generalization, but I have to, because that's the way we communicate in the world. But like with film, you have a horror film, and then you have like a romantic comedy, and you have a sci-fi movie or whatever. So when you do production for an album, and this is something that's always been a bit of a pet peeve for me, when you do production for an album, whether you do production for a black metal band or you do production for Whitney Houston, we'll go with her again, or whoever's a popular singer nowadays, Taylor Swift or something. So they try to have almost the same production. It's different instruments, and the instruments are performed in a different manner. Some are more distorted than others, and so on. But they always try to have that same production quality. And I always felt that was unfair, because the production itself should be part of the band. It should be almost like an extra member of the band to inform the audience of the mood. So we could use the idea of a horror movie. Now, would you want to make a horror movie have the same kind of lighting and cast and acting quality as a Julia Roberts movie where she's a quirky school teacher who won a ticket to go on a cruise, and she meets this dashing, elegant British gentleman on the ship, and they fall in love and have a fucking bunch of babies. Now that wouldn't have the same feeling as fucking, of the Universal Dracula. That's you wouldn't have the same feeling because Dracula's done in a slow pace. It's done in black and white. It's a totally different animal because of the way the production is involved. But the Julia Roberts movie is light and has bright colors, and she's saying soft things to you, and Dracula's saying deep and meaningful, horrifying, torturous things that challenge the way you perceive the world.
I'd like to touch on a couple of side projects. Firstly, Psywarfare. Is the vision for Psywarfare still the same as it was, I guess, when you started out, or has it evolved? And because I understand that obviously now with the live performances, there's a visual element to it as well. What is it that you're trying to express, or what type of experience you're trying to give to the audience with a live Psywarfare set?
Well, actually the first live concert that I did as Psywarfare was in '96, and I don't know how I was able to pull it off at the time, but we did have visuals video projected over us, but it was very primitive because of technology. Couldn't afford that to be able to do something good back then. And now I can just do it from my phone and plug it in with a special cable, and everything can look like it's Pink Floyd The Wall or something. But originally Psywarfare started out in a few different ways. The first album that I did was called Those Fear Tomorrow, and the beginning of the album starts off with what would be like a Psywarfare type thing, where it was a low rumbling bass with a serial killer talking about a sample of a serial killer talking about eliminating the human race. And that was basically in a way like an homage to the band White House from the UK. And from there I thought I like Throbbing Gristle and White House and a lot of experimental groups like that. They used to call it industrial. Now that maybe it's called noise. I'm not sure what those bands are defined as now. But and even that, like what we talked about before about categorizing things, it even evolves. Punk when I was a kid was one thing, and now punk is different because Green Day got popular on MTV. Then punk is something totally different than when I was a kid. But back to Psywarfare, I wanted to do something that was there are times where I think that integrity has its own, even though it should not have any boundaries. I try to keep it within a certain bit of boundary so that it has its own identity. And so it's recognizable that it's integrity, but it can also go in some different ways. And with Psywarfare, I wanted to make something that would be challenging to people. And also there was an aspect of, I spoke about it earlier today, how integrity was considered to be outcasts and outsiders from certain scenes early on. And then later, as the band released more and more records, it became those flaws, like our Andy Warhol metaphor there, became accepted. And I wanted to challenge myself and to challenge the people who listen to my music by creating something that was even more challenging, even more abstract. And so that was one aspect of Psywarfare. And then the other aspect of Psywarfare was when I was young and I would listen to punk and heavy metal, and including when I was recording my first recordings of my own music, it was always interpreted by people who from normal people from everyday walks of life, hearing that type of music. Maybe you've experienced this in your life with your parents or your grandparents or somebody or a neighbor who says, what is this kind of shit? It sounds like someone's throwing dishes down the stairs and screaming, kill your baby, eat your mother, blah, blah. This kind of, you've heard that from teachers, like, oh, that's just a bunch of fucking noise. It's driving me crazy. And I wanted to make that. I wanted to try to make the music that really fucking irritated these people and give it back to them, which Psywarfare means psychological warfare, which should inform like what the band's agenda is to psychologically attack you, psychologically challenge you as the audience experiencing it.
And I understand Vermipere was inspired by silent films.
Yeah, silent films, but it was more, I guess I would say it was inspired by a period almost, like we spoke about the blues and Robert Johnson and things. It was inspired by that period of the early 1900s when blues music was first created. The people who made blues music were generally the children of sharecroppers. I don't know if you know what that means in Australia. It's kind of like slavery without being owned, but basically it's slavery. It's like you work really hard and you don't get much money, but you live on the property of the plantation owner. It's like a baron, it's sort of like a caste system. And these people were very, very poor, and some of their children wanted to play guitars, but they couldn't afford guitars. So they would take the wooden boxes that their cigarettes and cigars would come in. The parents' cigars and cigarettes would come in, and they'd have an empty wooden box. Maybe they'd put their coins in it or their photographs of their family or their letters or something. And they'd open them up, and they'd use that as the box for the body of the guitar. And they'd take an old broomstick that they had, and they'd take off the straw that you used to sweep it with. Around that straw, to keep the straw on, there'd be a long metal wire. You unravel that wire. Now you have this broomstick. You stick the broomstick through the body of the cigar box. And with the nail at each end of the broomstick, you twist that metal wire and you pull it over, and then you stick a rock or something under it to lift up the string, and now the guitar can have a reverberation the tighter that you make it. And so that was the idea of the blues, the basis of Delta blues. And I wanted to make a form of metal music that would be honoring people like Robert Johnson and Blind Willie and Howlin' Wolf and all these guys. And so I built my own guitars, but I made them electric. And basically the electric guitar, that was just a way to make it louder, but I made it electric so it would be overly distorted and more raw and express this type of sound that I wanted to express. I could show you some. I have some over here. Hold on a second.
Oh wow!
So here's a couple of the guitars that I have just in my office here. This one is a one string, but I sort of bastardized Frankenstein this one up a bit.
It's incredible.
This has a plastic front, and I infused in here a modular synthesizer, and this is a WMD Geiger counter distortion pedal that I reassembled it so it fit into the body. This is a little bit broken right now, so I can't play it for you, but I did a Psywarfare concert in Mexico last year, and I built this for that. And so this also has a wireless in it, so it's portable. And the signal from the one string,
So
the one string bass.
What do sound engineers think when you rock up with something like this?
Yeah, they don't know what to think. They're usually not too pleased, but sometimes they're interested, but usually they don't know what to do. And so like it was me playing this and a looping pedal and vocals. But with this synthesizer here, I wired it in a way so that they would the signal, it wasn't mixed right, but it would like interfere with each other and they would have a conflict. So I was able to twist these knobs and make this sort of like, you know, like a fucked up modular synthesizer that makes like really infrasonic and ultrasonic frequencies. And then they would follow certain LFO patterns and stuff, interfering again with the signal that's coming through the distorted string. And then with the pedal, the distortion pedal would also interfere with that as well. So that was like sort of like that. That's more of an evolutionary creature for that, from that world. But this was the basic Vermipere guitar. This is a 2-string guitar, and here you see like the wooden box that you would put. You can almost see like the name on here where it said the name of whatever brand of cigarettes or cigars it was.
Yeah. And
then here you can see there's a pickup, and you can plug it through electric and play that. And I don't know if I can give you a quick demonstration. I'll try. But it had a more of a so you can plug it in. Can you see this thing?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're watching it now. It's great. Dwid rips.
Let's see, get this in. Oh, it seems like it might be busted. Oh, there it goes. I need something to slide on. I'll use it. Get a pig. So, you know, it was just like the idea of these old instruments, so you could play like. All the signals are broken.
Primitive as fuck. It's unreal.
It seems to be coming apart. It's an old one. My plug seems to have a short in it because it keeps cutting out. So I have to open it up and fix it up. Yeah, well, for not to destroy your interview with that cacophony, but that was the idea of it. And I come up with the idea from it because we were playing in Integrity played a show in Warsaw, and the guy who booked us for that festival was a manager at a hard rock cafe. They have a lot of old guitars and like clothing and stuff, like Elvis's jackets and whatever, but they'll have guitars from people hanging on the wall. And we sat down at this table because the promoter was the boss of that place, and that's where we got to have our meal. So we sat down at this table, and on the left was one of Sid Vicious's jackets. He was in the Sex Pistols. One of his leather jackets was on the wall. I said, "Oh, that's pretty crazy, you know." And on this side was one of Bo Diddley's first guitars, which looked not much further away from that guitar I just showed you. So I kind of looked at both of those things, and I thought, you know, that guitar looks fucking kind of mean, I'm surprised that it didn't sound meaner than it looks. You know, it sound like it looks. So I started thinking about that a little bit too much. And when I got home, I said, well, I bet I could make a guitar like Bo Diddley made. It didn't look that complicated. So I started messing around, and I ended up building a couple guitars. And eventually I figured out what I needed to figure out to make it perform the way I wanted it to. And at the prime of that guitar that I just played, it didn't have those shorts in it. That's just age and probably getting smashed around, because I played live with them sometimes too.
And for the Devil Master, we are the sons of Satan! We are the sons of Satan! Sons of the earth, sons of the sun! We are the sons of the earth, sons of the sun! We are the sons of Satan! Sons of the earth! We are the sons of Satan! Sons of the sun! Our souls down! Rise! Never wake up! Violence! Human! Devil! We are so kind! We're to destroy! We are the sons of Satan! We're to destroy! Let souls die! Rise! Never wake up! Violence! Human! Devil! We are so kind! We're to destroy!
I have a friend who was, he works with metal, welding metal, not heavy metal. And he made me, I wanted to have one of my favorite albums, of many favorite albums I have, but one of my favorite albums is, are you familiar with Alan Lomax? Do you know who he was?
Name rings a bell, yeah.
He was a man who, when they first invented record players, the early turntables had an option where you could switch it and you could actually record, and you could record like a happy birthday to someone in your family. You could record a little message, or you could record yourself reading Shakespeare, or you could record yourself reading a poem, whatever you wanted to do with those early turntables. And it would actually work like a lathe, you know. It would cut into that was how you could record something, you know. Before there was wire recording, and then there was this possibility. And he went to the Library of Congress and said, hey, I have this idea. You guys have this library, you got books that record history, but what you don't have is the ability to record the history of sound. And with this instrument, we could go around and record people who are living in remote areas. We could record the music for their culture, for their neighborhood, whatever it would be. and we could document that, and we could store that in your library so that 100 years from now, somebody could go back and reference that and experience the same thing, like reading Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn or something. And so from Mark Twain. So the Library of Congress was like, wow, that's a revolutionary idea. How much money do you need? They gave him the money, and he drove down to the American South, and he recorded people performing out all kinds of music, religious music, what became Delta blues music, and he sort of created the music industry pretty much. But he always was searching, Alan Lomax was always searching for the most unique experience, because that's what you want. You know, you don't want to have all the same thing again. So at some point he heard from some, because what he would do is he'd go into a small town. He would say, hey, do you have anybody in this town that plays music, you know, the interesting kind of music, like their own kind of thing? And they say, oh yeah, this guy over here does, or over at the church, the pastor, he does something or whatever. At some point someone said, you know, over at the prison, they got all kinds of crazy stuff going on with music over there, and you should record that. He said, well, that's really a unique idea. So he went down to the prison, and this is the type of prison, you know, this is the early 1900s. So this is that type of prison where they're wearing those wool, white pants, long pants, long jackets with the black and white stripes, yeah. You know, like you see them in, for Halloween, you want to play a criminal with a ball and chain and stuff, you know, and you get that costume. So these people was wearing that out in, you know, they're breaking rocks and digging holes and cutting down trees and, you know, basically doing, again, slave labor for the government. And these people were like probably the closest that anybody in the recorded and in audibly recorded history could get to being literally in fucking hell. And the only way they could cope with that was they would spiritually sing to escape their flesh prison. Not they was in prison too, but their flesh prison, the prison that kept them locked into that prison, you know, into those, behind those four walls, was also their flesh, which kept them there as well. So without the flesh, if they could get their soul out of their bodies, maybe for a minute there, a fleeting minute, they could experience freedom again. And this goes back to your question about when I perform music. This is kind of what I chase, is this feeling. So these men would be, you know, breaking rocks on a chain gang. You know that term, chain gang?
So they'll breaking rocks on the chain gang.
Yeah. So they'd be chained at the ankle and be a long line of these guys. And then they would swing like a sledgehammer, hit the rock. And then they'd move their leg as they swing it to get that momentum. And by moving the leg, you sort of have that sound, you know, of a ch, and then the crack. And so that was their percussion. And over top of that, they would all sing in different harmonies, songs that were often have an innuendo or allusion to something else. Like they might sing a song about how they want to fucking kill the guard, but they would hide it in different ways of saying it, you know. Or they'd sing a song about sexually explicit experiences with a lady, but they would hide it by using metaphors of flowers and colors and things like that. And so I had a friend of mine build me this.
One more piece of Dwid archival rock history. Are we going to get a Dwid guitar model like that? What the hell's that?
So I got a friend of mine who works in metal making. He built this for me. So the idea was what I said before, them guys breaking rocks. I'm gonna see if I can get this in. Is that in?
Oh yeah, I can see it. Like a brutal kick drum pedal.
So you see this here. This is basically the spike that you put into the railroads.
Yep.
And this is a hammer, and then this is just a piece of metal, and then at the end there's a chain. The chain is loosely mounted on purpose so that, again, like we talked about Andy Warhol and the Flaws, I didn't want to have it do the same sound each and every time. I wanted it to have a bit of error so it would sound human. And so it wouldn't just be a sample, because if it was a sample, I could just sample one of those records and just put that in my sampler and just push the button over and over and over again. And that wouldn't be very interesting.
You get a different sound. Quick demo.
Yeah, so every time you hit it, it has a different reaction. Well, a little bit different, but different nonetheless. So there's a little bit differences with each time that you step on it.
Yep.
Not dramatically different, but enough that it sounds like it has its own character. And so I had him build that. That was the percussion aspect of Vermipere. And then I played that guitar over that and then do vocals. So it was kind of a simple process, but the idea was to create a weird version of the blues music.
With the human sampler. Thanks so much for your time and, of course, the insightfulness of your instruments, and love to find out more about it in the future. And we look forward to having you on the program again. We are going to check out some live footage that Steve also filmed as well. Any couple of last words to complete our insightful chat with the Dwid?
No, it's been a nice talking to you guys, and I hope that you found some of it interesting.
That's
Well, welcome to the program. As always, we love bringing you great guests to discuss all things to do with their musical careers and stuff that you may learn about that you didn't know before. And we're going to welcome a guest right now, Dom from Integrity. Welcome to the program.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you.
So, Dom, your story is a bit like Tim Ripper Owens, if I don't mind drawing that analogy from Judas Priest, in that you were a massive Integrity fan, idolized the band, and you end up in the band. So, you know, you sort of wake up thinking, how cool is this kind of thing?
It's happened a few times. I've been, before being in the band, I worked for the band for well over 10, 15 years. So you know, I mean, it was like a natural progression. It wasn't as much of a shell shock. It does like feel weird sometimes when we're playing live and I'm playing those songs that I'm like actually doing it. And, you know, but, for the most part, you know, I've been pretty close to the fire in other ways for all these years. So, you know, like I said, it was just more of a logical progression as to where things would go.
And working with the band before being in the band, do you feel, obviously you know so much about the band and the music, obviously, but since you've joined the group officially, how much influence have you put into the band? And has Dwid been quite open for your input?
Oh, 100%. It's a 50-50 thing. Him and I we bang out songs together. I'll work on them with Joshy, who plays drums on Howling. He doesn't play drums live with Integrity. He plays in a band called Ilsa that's also on Relapse and was on A389. But pretty much him and I hammer out the details for the songs. I bring the songs to Joshy and we can flesh them out, and then I just give them to Dwid, and he picks the ones he likes, and we kind of take it from there. So it's really good. I mean, like, you know, it's unique in its own way, in that, you know, it's a lot of I don't know. It's not as like the word I'm looking for. It's not as organic where it doesn't really happen quickly. It kind of just, it's more of a long brew. You know what I mean? Like he'll get the song and sit on it for a while, and then he'll suggest another part comes in here, or if it needs this and that, and we'll take it. It usually takes about a year for a song from start to finish to get to where we need it to be. They don't happen very quickly, not compared to other bands I've been in, but I can't argue with the result. You know, I'm pretty happy with how the records have come out thus far. So it's definitely cool.
Well, the last record was, I guess, a little bit more metallic, in my opinion, sound-wise. I was actually really, really surprised by that. Was that a conscious thing for the band to sort of move into a bit more of a, metallic-ish sound?
It's kind of where I've always been and where I've always imagined the band should go. Like, I kind of used my favorite Integrity record before I joined was Seasons and the Size of Days, which came out in like 98, 96, somewhere around there, like 98 or 97. It's foggy for me, but that's just my favorite record. I always imagined what record would have come next is always like my fantasy role-playing wizardry when I'm trying to conjure up music for Integrity. I always imagined that the band, if they made a record after that, what would I want it to be? And I noticed a common thread in other Integrity records, and not knocking them because I love every single Integrity record and can reference any Integrity song, no matter how obscure. But I just found a very commonplace thing was happening where there was a lot of a D beat going, that they're kind of like shoehorning Dwid into like the same kind of patterns over and over. So we kind of made a conscious effort with Howling to just open that up a little bit more and like just do different things. And like I was in a heavy Led Zeppelin phase at the time and was just marveling over how a band like Led Zeppelin or even the Beatles, just all their songs sound completely different, but it's definitely the same band. You know what I mean? It's definitely no question. And Dwid and I definitely kind of were like, we should do that, just have a bunch of different kind of songs. So when we demoed out Howling, there's probably like 20 or 25 rough songs that were in circulation. And, you know, we just kind of put all the best parts together and weeded out the fat and tried to come up with something that was really diverse. And I think it worked. I think it was pretty diverse. You know, it was definitely a more of an oral experience listening to it. You know what I mean? There's just there's a lot to take in. If you listen, especially when you listen with headphones, there's a lot of stuff that's buried in the mix that a casual listener might not hear on the first time. But if you sit up with that record with headphones, I guarantee you'll find tons of stuff that you didn't even know was there. So it's pretty cool. We got to go pretty crazy with it.
And as Andrew mentioned, it really does have a more metallic sound. Definitely the, almost extreme metal or even black metal kind of sound. Are there any
Sometimes
particular bands of those types of genres that you really dig?
Dark Throne and Emperor and Immortal and Burzum and bands like that. I mean, I like that first Mayhem LP, the Das Mysterious, Satanus, whatever it's called, but it's like, I kind of like just listen to a lot of stuff and kind of listen for things that I like and mentally store them away for a reference point later. And, a lot of people jump to the assumption that there's a lot of a black metal influence on Howling, but I mean, it's really only on the track Blood Sermon and maybe sprinkled throughout. But it's like, for instance, the thing I'll take from a black metal as a genre that I really like is how they shift minor chords around and move them around like power chords. I always thought that was cool. And I thought it would be neat to put that in a framework for Integrity and just kind of, work with that. So it's like, I cherry pick from every genre and just find stuff that I like. And I kind of have like a mental toolbox of ideas, if you will. But yeah, as far as like black metal stuff goes, it's not a genre that I'm super, super, super into, but I enjoy the odd thing when it comes on. Like I said, that first Mayhem LP and Immortal, Battles of the North are probably like my two that I listen to the most, that I've like obsessed over. It's pretty cool.
The term heavy is used a lot to describe music. The way I would describe Integrity is the darkest sounding band that I've come across. Maybe not the heaviest, but the darkest. From a musical perspective, what do you think makes Integrity so dark from a sonic perspective?
I have to agree, and it's the vocals. As soon as Dwid adds those vocals, it can take a song that can otherwise be, like middle of the road as far as a mood goes. It can go either way. It could be kind of a driving song. It could be like something like String Up My Teeth, which sounds like it could be like a LA Gun song or something, but it's like, once those vocals are on there, he kind of takes it to a totally different place. I have to give full credit to when he adds the vocals is when the darkness really comes into play. But I'm also conscious when arranging the songs that if something's not dark enough, it's got to get tweaked a little bit, whether it's adding some minor chords to it or just, just changing the riff pattern around so it's a little more ominous sounding. But it's definitely the vocals. Once those vocals hit in, it's just like, I call it gets integrified, you know what I mean? Like whenever I send demos that I'm not sure about, once I hear vocals on it, then it makes sense. And I'm like, okay, I get this now. This is going to work, And it always does. It's real weird. It's just like as soon as like the vocals get added, it becomes a whole different thing. It's really, really cool.
Now, to me, Integrity have kind of always sort of stood alone, even though everything today in the metal genre at least gets subcategorized, which is pretty ridiculous considering now there's countless, subgenres affiliated with metal. But the band's always had a really strong sort of essence of just keeping it, I guess, underground, and to a degree, metal in certain forms is still very underground now. Do you still pride yourselves on retaining that kind of feeling of not wanting to, what's the word? I'm not going to use the word sell out in any way because can't sell out with Integrity music, but you sort of get what I mean, how the band's always retained that real sort of underground sense in not just music, but just as an entity.
Well, what always appealed to me as a fan of the band and also as a writer for the band is that it's just, as a fan and as a writer, it just is, I guess it would make more sense to explain it from the writer's perspective, but it's like, we just make songs that we want to hear and that we think are cool. So it's never just like, hey, this, discordant, really moshy thing is in right now. We should try to go for that. It's always just like, hey, you know what? I've been listening to a lot of James Brown. If we wrote a song like that but made it heavy, it might be cool. Yeah, let's do that. You know what I mean? It's just like, there's absolutely no pretense in how Integrity creates music. It's all about just me and Dwid banging ideas off each other and being like, and even writers before me, it's just like, it's more about writing and it just becomes Integrity, you know what I mean? It's not like it's never a preconceived notion how a record is intended to sound or what it's going to be like or who it's going to appeal to. We just make records that we think are cool. And like, that's how I've always approached writing music and running the label and signing bands and my own bands prior to Integrity. It's always just been about filling that void, doing the stuff that you want to do and making the stuff that you want to hear, you know what I mean? And hopefully it resonates with other people. And It does, you know what I mean? People can tell when something's sincere and authentic, and it goes a long way.
One thing I enjoyed with the Integrity shows earlier this year in Australia was yourself playing the guitar on the back of your head. Don't think I've seen that since Witchcraft in 2004. Was that inspired by any particular guitarist? And are there any specific guitarists you're inspired by?
I think I perfected that in Australia, because before I would kind of almost get it there. I think Australia is when I finally got it like all the way behind my head and was able to go for it. I think the shows were just so good and they were so intense that I had that extra kick in the back to make it happen. But geez, for guitar players, I can go on forever, man. It's everybody I've ever heard somehow has sprinkled a little bit of that pixie dust into what I do, because it's like, you know, and it's like anytime I've been asked to list people, it changes every day. So, you know, like today, I'll tell you, you know, I was listening to Body Count a lot today. So I like listening to Ernie C play guitar, because I like how he does those real sad solos, but adds major key twists to it. You know, I always think that's really great. And I listened to that new Cro-Mags record today, and they got Rocky George, and it was like one of the greatest guitar players ever. First dude I heard that just ripped through an entire song soloing and changed how I look at playing guitar, you know. And Gabby Abularock is in that band too, and he's super underrated. And, you know, geez, I can go on forever, man. I was listening to Mulatu Estaski all day today as well. It's just like, everything. I'm just like a giant musical sponge. I take everything in, digest it, and spit it out into whatever happens, you know?
Of course, you also ran A389 Records for about 15 years, releasing some pretty cool artists, not just Integrity. You had Iron Reagan, I Hate God, I think there was a single, and Melbourne's Finest Mind Snare as well, a split with the Ringworm. How did you get started out running a record label?
When I was growing up as a younger man in Canada, I had a little hobby label I did called 13th Day Records, which just released my band, Day of Mourning, at the time, and just friends' bands. Death for Every Sin was one of them, and you know, there was a few. And when I had moved to Maryland, I had a band going called Slumlords with Jeff Perlin from Breakdown. It was like a New York hardcore punk oi type thing. And that got, you know, pretty popular pretty quickly within I use the word popular loosely, in the hardcore realm. You know, we started getting a lot of opportunities to do cool stuff, might be a better way to put it. And I just saw that as a platform to be able to help my friends out that weren't in that position. So I started putting out records from people I was friends with. Like the first few records I did were like, you know, Bring It On, we're like a local band. And then like it evolved into bands like Wisdom and Chains, who are still going and are more popular than ever. I'm sorry, excuse me 1 second. My cat is demanding to go out. Just 1 second. Sorry, I locked all my kids and my pets out, but they're still finding a way to interfere. But yeah, so, you know, then from there, it just was like doing little 7-inches for my friends' bands. And there's Trapped Under Ice. There was a lot of bands that were like in their infancy that I had worked with just to like help just get it out there, stuff that I thought was cool. And I think it took 23 records before I did an Integrity record, which was the Walpurgis Knot 7-inch was the first Integrity record I did. And that just brought a lot more attention to what I was doing. And I mean, honestly, you know, not to sound like I'm bragging or anything, because it's goofy, but it's like, it was feasible for A389 at its height of powers to work with whoever I wanted to and do whatever I wanted, because it was never like there was never any pretense to the label. The label only existed to put out cool records. So I could get I Hate God to do a 7-inch, or Black Dahlia Murder to do a 7-inch out of their, you know, contract. And at the same time, I can put out Full of Hell's first record that, you know, when they were a new band and no one had heard of them. So it was just more just like, it was my way of using my power of influence to just show people cool bands and cool records. And a lot of that stuff stood the test of time. A lot of those bands are still going and they're still doing really well. So I'm really proud that, like, you know, despite the label folding and me moving on and never even dreaming of doing a record label ever again. But I'm just happy that a lot of the bands that I bet on are still going, and like really like just, you know, their integrity is intact, no pun intended.
In regards to where we're at right now in the world, like every other band is affected, how much do you miss live shows, not just performing, but attending?
I tell you what, man, I am so grateful that we managed to get into Australia and play those shows before all of this happened, because that was literally on the cusp of this whole thing imploding. And man, I remember it so fondly. Those shows in Australia were so much fun. And yeah, I miss all of it, you know? I mean, obviously, home life has kept me very busy because with schools being out, I'm homeschooling 3 young children and teleworking from my day job. So it's just like, you know, planning to keep me, and I'm writing the Integrity record as well as a couple other projects I'm doing. So, I mean, there's just tons to keep me busy. But yeah, I miss that exchange, you know, playing a show and just hanging out with, just being able to see those guys, because we all live in different parts, different cities. It's, I miss them, you know, we have a really great time when we're together, and like the shows are always amazing. And I'm bummed. You know, I was really, there was a midnight gig that was coming up I was really looking forward to seeing. And just a whole bunch of stuff, man. Just it's too bad. I really hope things really come back together for 2021. Mainly because I really want to see Merciful Fate. They're playing in Las Vegas. I think that'd be really awesome. But yeah, it's a strange time. There's so much uncertainty. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know if there'll ever be a live show again. You know, it just feels like it's such a distant memory at this point, and it seems just like, you know, the last thing of importance in a lot of people's mind. But at the same time, it's like a fairy tale, you know what I mean? It almost seems like folklore at this point when I tell my kids about it, because it's just like no one can imagine doing anything more than like going for a walk outside with your mask on. You know, it's pretty bizarre time to be alive.
And with the materials that you're working on, you mentioned there's a couple of other projects. Are you able to divulge anything on those?
I have a band going right now with it's always Joshy from Ilsa is always my drum guy, because him and I just click musically, you know what I mean? We can kind of always predict what the other person is. He's my spirit animal when it comes to writing music. So it's him and I, and we're working with Scott from Bloodlet. We designed it to be a 1981 to 82 style new wave of British heavy metal band. And we're almost done demoing an LP. We're up to 9 or 10 songs right now. And yeah, it was just that's something I did during this being isolated. There's nothing I can do, you know what I mean? I wrote a bunch of songs, sent them to Scott, and he just bounced them back. And it's something we've been having fun doing, and have no expectation to really do anything with it, you know what I mean? Maybe people might not ever even hear it, but it's been a hell of a lot of fun to do, and just keep distracted and keep positive, you know?
What are some of those influences from that era that's helped put this project together from 1980 to 81, as you said?
Iron Maiden Killers.
Yep.
The Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations record, and a little bit of Thin Lizzy and late 70s Scorpions, I think, is the cocktail we're going for. And then, of course, you know, a little helping of Sunset Strip, you know, just all those bands too. So it's definitely been cool. A lot of Thor, but it's not really like a leather and studs kind of thing. You know, it's just really cool. It's just you know, maybe the world will hear it someday, maybe not. But it's been, like I said, it's been a hell of a lot of fun to do. It's been turning out really well. And the Integrity demos, not to derail, have also been going pretty well. It's like we've been striving to not repeat what we did on Howling, so it's not going to be like Howling 2. It's like just kind of touching on things that we haven't done, and trying to mix it up while still keeping it integrity. And aside from that, my original idea during quarantine was to just record a bunch of songs. Like I would try to write a song every day. It's something I got from reading a Kiss book, and Gene Simmons would talk about how he would write a song a day, even if it sucked. Just to kind of set the bar to write a song a day. And I started trying to do that when I was stuck at home. And there's song, you know, I would just be like, all right, today I'm gonna write a reggae song. Today I'm gonna do this, you know what I mean? And like I said, most of it's throwaway stuff, but every once in a while, there'll be a riff in one of those songs where I'm like, whoa, that's a pretty cool riff. And then I'm able to build that into something else that I can use for one of my actual bands. So it's been a lot of fun. I think the quarantine, I naturally like being isolated and don't really like going out much. So, you know, it's kind of served me well. I haven't done much of anything.
I'm gonna witness.
Dude, I miss that. Getting to like kind of live at the Bendigo for a week was so fun. It was in such a cool part of town. I had such it was so cool. It was like one of my favorite parts of the trip was just hanging out in that upstairs bunk, hanging out. We were Dwid and I were bouncing song ideas off for this one song that we were working on. It was just like it was real inspiring. It was a really cool town. And the other Melbourne show was sick too. That one with Mind Snare was one for the books, man. It was awesome.
I'm hoping because a lot of the venue, I don't know what's like in Baltimore, but a lot of venues here are really struggling and they might close doors and stuff like that. And Bendigo is one of those. So hopefully they can pull through in these times. So
that's what I was saying, where I'm like, I don't know if the music thing is gonna, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, is there gonna be shows in 2021? Because yeah, sure, the bands might be rip roaring and ready to go, but is there gonna be anywhere to play if everything is shut down? You know what I mean? They expect people to pay their rent for like not even counting their employees and staff, just like the rent on the venue on the venue itself for like a year without being able to use it. It's a lot of strain, man.
Yeah, hopefully the venues will survive so that we can see some shows next year.
I hope things can go back to some sort of normality. It's definitely a scary time, and it's also like a weird like it's like when they destroyed all music in Cambodia, you know what I mean, and just made it you're only allowed to work and like go home is like the only things you're allowed to do. And I'm like imagining if like, you know, that's like, you know, like a covert thing that's going on right now. I'm like, are we gonna be robbed? Yeah, I know it's like, you know, some tinfoil hat shit, but it's like, are we gonna be robbed of the arts? You know what I mean? It's a privilege. It's a privilege to really be able to do this, you know, at the end of the day when you think about existence and the things that you have to do to survive versus the things you want to do. And it's like, it is a privilege, and it's just crazy to be like, see how much we took for granted when it was just such an easy thing to do versus how difficult it's going to be as things progress, you know?
Which that's an interesting analogy. The killing fields, it's kind of, that's what's happened to the music industry this year. It's the killing fields. Everyone's been slaughtered. It's just like, there's no exceptions.
Yeah, not to make light. It's just that it's like, I mean, it could be an effective way where it's just like, you know, it could, and you know, playing extreme devil's advocate here, but I mean, it very well could be a situation where it's like there's nothing to come back to. You know what I mean? What if there are no venues? What if mass gatherings remain illegal? It's just like, what happens? You know what I mean? It's like, it's stuff that like you never think that would happen in our lifetime, and it's happened before. Why couldn't it happen again? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's definitely heavy, man. It's like, it's a crazy time to be alive. That's for sure.
I mean, it is interesting times, as you said earlier on, and it really is down to the choices you make of how you spend that time. And others do it negatively, others do it positively. They get creative, and again, we're just going to see. Well, if anything, we still are seeing an influx of bands just releasing random singles every couple of weeks, and just to say, hey, we've just been in the home studio, just putting things together. And okay, bands are doing live streams as well, but I'm sure once this whole thing is over, the music industry is just going to be a tsunami of tours and and records. Any bands in particular that you're looking forward to hearing some new music coming out, I guess, in the next maybe 6 to 8, 10 months?
Oh my God. I live in such a bubble, man, where it's just like I listen to so much old music and just obscure random stuff that it's like it's hard. I mean, I always look forward to whatever Midnight is doing. They're one of my favorite current bands. Devil Master, new Devil Master record should be great. I'm excited for that always. You know, it's just I think Nothing has a new record that they just finished. It's pretty much my alumni from the label or the bands I kind of follow. And like I said, I like deep diving into just random subgenres, man. Like I've been deep diving into like just weird Egyptian jazz music and just, that's like I mentioned earlier, you know what I mean? I try to like cherry pick ideas. So I'll listen to one thing and then I'll just end up in a rabbit hole of different things and totally lose track of where I am or what I'm doing. Just totally get derailed. But when I come back to the surface, I come back with a whole bunch of cool ideas. But sorry, yeah, to answer your question, I would say Midnight and Devil Master are probably my two most anticipated current band releases. And the Nothing record for sure.
Speaking of live shows, I think it was about 6 years ago you were involved, I believe, in organising a reunion show with, I guess, the classic lineup of Integrity with the Melnick Brothers.
I was.
How was that experience for you?
That was that probably took. Well, I would have to take you back to the late '90s to Seasons and the Size of Days era Integrity, where I was in the last year of high school, and that lineup with the Melnick Brothers and Domenic and Chris Dora, they were playing Buffalo. I grew up in Toronto, just outside of Toronto, and that lineup was playing in Buffalo, or slated to play in Buffalo rather, with State of Conviction. And at the time, I had a girlfriend in high school whose birthday happened to fall on that same weekend. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, I have to go to the show. It's like, I've never seen, Integ at the time wasn't able to come to Canada. And that was the only shot I was going to get to seeing them anywhere remotely close. And, you know, of course, luck have it. She's like, no, it's my birthday. No. You know, and I'm just like, oh, dude, come on. She's like, no, it's my birthday. We're not going. So, you know, I tried to do the right thing, which always will bite you in the ass, putting that out there. And, you know, I hung out with her on her birthday and we ended up breaking up within a year, and I never got to see Integrity perform with that lineup. So, you know, I've been a fan of the band for so long and, you know, reasonably friendly with everybody that's involved to different extents. And that was just something I had to kind of inch Aaron and Dwid towards each other little by little, year after year. And just, you know, and Bloodlet had played that year, and it was a similar situation where it's just like, you're not getting any younger. If you're gonna do it, now's the time to do it. So people see you, and it's like you're still a decent version of yourself. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to see like 70-year-old dudes going up there rehashing like stuff they did in their teen or early 20s. You know what I mean? So the time was just right, and I just, you know, my luck hit pay dirt that year, man. I got Bloodlet and Integrity to play that year for the first time in ages, and it was sick, man. It was like it's just cool seeing the architects that designed so many of my favorite songs in both of those bands together, hanging out as friends, but also performing those songs. It was just a real treat for somebody like myself that really like truly loves the music and like knows every in and out and every little nuance about it. Just seeing the guys that made it and watch them practice and seeing how they do that little fill that I always thought was a mistake on the record, but they actually do it in the song. It was just really cool. And it was meant to be a one-time thing. And with Integ, it was, you know, it was business as usual after that. Things just went back to, Integ isn't really a nostalgia thing, you know what I mean? Integrity kind of lives in the now. So it was like, it was a treat for old fans, but it was like moving forward with Integ. And then Bloodlet ended up getting the itch to make a new record, and they ended up doing a new record on Translation Loss earlier last year. I think it was Viper in Hand. It was like a new 10-inch they did. They did a tour in Europe. So I was really happy. I was happy I got to see both bands perform, and that like one of my favorite bands are back together making music, which is really cool. It's kind of nice to have a hidden hand in making that happen.
Well, awesome stuff. It's been great to talk to you, Dom. I mean, you've got some great stories, great history, and we're in a pretty crazy time, as we all know, but take it easy over there.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to introduce the band. my friends, Alex Henderson the Beast on drums. Justin the Sex Man Ethel in our ride. Good guy. On the bass guitar, Francis O'Kane. The Devil Master. And on the lead guitar, straight from the coronavirus itself, Domenic Romeo. My name is Dwid Hellion, we are Integrity, and this is Jagged Visions of My True Destiny.